Welcome, everybody. This is our second Ask Us Anything Q&A online gathering. We had one last night. There are a few people here who were also with us last night. And yeah, it was really great to meet people and share stories and for us to be able to answer questions, but for everybody to be able to chime in too, whether you want to do that on the chat
or just jump in.
Whoever wants to start with a question or a comment, over to you.
So my question, and I hope everybody doesn't mind me asking this because probably people have practical kind of questions and questions related to the here and now and your experience and how you've done things to date. But I actually have almost like a next step question in terms of you've spent decades getting to where you are, but is there anything that you haven't sort of stepped away from? Is there still a list of things that you kind of are wanting to address, or is it never ending, or are you in a happy place, so to speak, with the transition that you've made or are making?
Great question.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. And also, yes, we're here to answer little questions from fermenting hacks right through to the bigger meta story. So thank you. Yeah, we're happy to go anywhere. Um, I might just start. And then, yeah, so one of the things I'm really thinking about is just how digital technology is still ensnaring my life, and yet I'm really conscious about it. And it's still very pervasive. It's an incredible tool for information, but I'm noticing going back to reading books, and certainly really interested in one-on-one or group story sharing in that oral tradition. And I feel like that's my future. So while sharing story like this is still so wonderful, and being able to speak across worlds like we are right now, I feel like as the internet and AI and AGI particularly develops, I think it'll be actually quite dangerous to have digital devices. So I think my next thing is how much time I spend online and whether we can scale back digital devices. That's just one thing that's on my horizon.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like, um, we've already kind of started this, but especially as our parents are aging and as we're aging, and a lot of our chosen community elders are aging, just starting to think about our death more and more, and starting to do sort of that deeper death work that, yeah, it feels really important for us to do. And yeah, just thinking about when me personally, like when I die, what do I want to happen next? Like with my body, what does my funeral look like? Like really giving that some thought and sharing that.
Mm.
Yeah, so for me that feels like, and I'm 51, so hopefully I've got more time, but I we don't, of course we never know.
Yeah, and I
Thank
think
you. Both of those resonate really strongly. So perfect answer. Thank you. Lovely.
great.
Thanks, Sharon.
We were asked a similar question at a recent screening in Geelong, just about where next. And another answer we gave was, for me, I feel in many ways this transition is we're not necessarily on pause, but we are, I think, waiting for people around us to catch up a bit more in terms of where they are on their transition, because the next stage is the village aspect. And even though that's very strong and there's lots of wonderful things going on there, particularly the men's and women's circles and the bush school and the gift sharing. However, this is not a nuclear family project. This is actually a village project or a community project. And there are many communities, including the community here that's gathered this morning. So So I think that work is not held up, but I do feel there's a pause. And I think that that will speed up as we enter collapse further. And so as people, where it's really, we've been saying for many years, um, do the work of transition now while there's still relative affluence and less panic, because when you have to do it in a panic situation, it's going to be harder. So I think there's the writing is on the wall so much more in 2025 in terms of economic collapse, in terms of all the warring and the power vacuuming and the power assertion and all the big geopolitical stuff that is indicating collapse and meltdown, and particularly in the West. Um, and our institutions becoming more authoritarian as they fear what collapse actually means. And so it's that it is providing opportunity, and people are either panicking or getting into a fear state about that. And what we're trying to do is not play into that, is actually yeah, so that's where grounding and being grounded in the practices of everyday life is really important for us, rather than in the virtual world just sort of swimming in the doom scrolling and sort of kind of creating a lot of noise and anxiety around that.
Yeah. I heard somebody, it was a while ago, instead of doom and gloom, it's doom and bloom.
Mm.
And I really like that. Like, how do we, all of the processes from modernity and industrialization that we untangle ourselves from, the more things we do for ourselves in a really intentional, conscious way, the more meaning we find and the more meaning we help create. So I also really like that aspect of it, that it's not in reaction to what's happening, because that sort of feels like a negative thing, but it's more of how else can we bring meaning into our lives? And usually it's by working hard, helping others, being in relationship.
Mm. And that's like the switch from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. It's really just a frame that if we have trauma or grief, as big or small as it might be, the opportunity for growth obviously this is in the abstract, and we all go through grief and trauma in a very different way, and sometimes it's a very long passage of time, and it's not like a ridding of grief and trauma, but it's actually an absorbing of these things that I think we're going to need to all become better at as collapse unfolds and as suffering is elevated, really, particularly in comfortable countries like Australia.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Sharon, for initiating the first question.
That's right. Can I just make one other comment in relation to your response? And that is that I feel really privileged in so many ways that I'm on this journey already. But I think that one of the important things as we, head towards collapse, or our society and culture is so challenging in so many ways, that there's an immense responsibility that comes with that privilege that we have to be already on that pathway. And so one of the reasons that I love hearing and interacting with you guys is that I feel that you also are living that responsibility, and just having this Zoom opportunity, for example, is an illustration of that for me. So yeah, as I say, I think that privilege and responsibility, like hand in hand, we need to care for each other as we move ahead.
Yeah, that's
Definitely.
such a great point.
Yeah.
I saw something a little while ago, and I've lost. I didn't see the rest of the video. You talked with Sue about the concept of permaculture divorce, and my partner and I are not in that way. We're both interested in permaculture, but I'm probably more aware of collapse and those sorts of things. I'm more interested in kind of getting away from the system. And I think he is scared of those concepts. And I think I'm interested, I guess, probably in what Patrick's been doing, because you know, he's a middle-aged man in his 50s, brought up that very, you don't show emotion, you certainly don't talk about your fears. I notice that most of the people attending these are women, so I'm just really interested, I guess, to maybe what's Patrick's experience with the men's group and how, you know, allowing men to, or helping them to talk about this stuff, because it is a real issue with us sometimes, that I want to talk about my fears and where I want to go, and it gets very kind of emotional, very hard to talk about.
Yeah, it's yeah, men are conditioned in this culture like as women are, and the conditioning goes back a long way. I think what I've spoken before about how men were the first to be exiled from a household and community economies, and put down the mines. This is, I guess, my ancestral men, and put into the factories when the factories started. And then there's this demoralization. It's this severing of land bondedness and the seasons and the cycles. And so I think a lot of the trouble we have today, and you know, men feel this, or express this to me, is this severing or this disconnection, and in their relating to the world. And so I think generations of first mines, then factory workers, then you know, quite often office workers, being the so-called breadwinners, in an industrial or modern sense, and then the kind of emptying out of the sacred. And so it's a massive project, I think, for men, individually, to look into that history and say, how did I get here? How did I get to this place where I feel these pressures, or I feel the only way that I can contribute is through that lens or that way. And I think the only answer to that is for each man to actually be conscious of that, or at least to understand that the narratives that go, the ancestral narratives that go into making us up. And if there isn't an interest in that, there isn't and also that many men are happy with that and do not want to go, do not see that there is an issue. That is a problem in a collapse scenario where the role of men in household and community economies will start to elevate again. And so there'll be less money and more potential for men to step into meaningful roles in the house economy, in the household economy especially. So it's complex, and I'm only speaking from my own experience, and recognizing that that's incredibly limited as well.
And it also sounds like how do we navigate difference in the world? You know, because the world feels like, you know, it's very polarized and binary. But how do we navigate it in our relationships and then in ourselves? And, you know, this is a work in progress, how we navigate change together, because we have very different ways of dealing with pressure as well, you know, in terms of our polyvagal theory and how we adapt to things. You know, Patrick he's fight mode and I'm fright mode. And so even, you know, when pressure is building in the house or outside the house, you know, I have a real issue with, you know, that fight mode, and he thinks that I'm not doing anything because I'm in fright mode. And, you know, even just this navigating this difference. And we do find that having daily check-ins, just that time when it's just us two. And I was saying last night in the online conversation about how Woody sleeps in. He doesn't have to he doesn't go to school, so he doesn't have to get up at a certain time, and he does tend to sleep later, which gives us our mornings. And to have that deep listening time and not fixing, not offering advice, just, listening with an open heart and speaking with an open heart. I find that so helpful.
Yeah.
Just to like, where are you at? What's going on with you? It's like, oh, that's why, you're reacting like that, because this is going on for you that I didn't know before.
Yeah. Yeah. When in the tension parts of our relationship, it usually means that we haven't done that process for a while. And then we just kind of, we're talking across each other, not listening to each other, not hearing each other. And, but I think this time there is individual work to do, household work to do, and then neighborhood or community work to do in terms of reorientating our economic reality to something far more resilient and local.
So Katie, also as part of your question, you were mentioning the men's work that Patrick is involved in. What specifically is it that you're wanting to know?
How helpful is that in opening men up to going from, I guess, that closed breadwinner role, can't kind of talk about fears, to being more open? But then I imagine it's one of those things, the people who come to that group are the ones who are open in the first place. But
there have been over the years men whose partners who have kind of given them an ultimatum to come along to the first one, and begrudgingly stepped in, and then just fell in love with the process, and it was demystified. But look, it is for men, I think, much more than women, a scary thing to do. And even men who come to a few and say that was life-changing, we'll never see them again. So, and sometimes it's just that one or two men's circles that is enough too for men to rejig and recalibrate and rewire and say, oh, okay, this is it's okay that I feel these things, or it's okay that I can express myself like this. So there's no membership, there's no association by guilt, or it's really a circle like we're having one tonight. A fire is lit in the forest, and sometimes 20 men show up, and sometimes 6, and it's whoever needs that support, and but also many men come to support other men too, and don't necessarily aren't necessarily there with their big stories, or they're actually there as part of what we call the basket.
I don't know what I want to say, but it's something to do with compassion, about meeting people where they're at, and yeah, just thinking that what Patrick was saying, like particularly for men who are in very specific roles, that the culture shows respect and elevates men to be a certain way, and that is very hard if they're not conscious or not willing to do the work to be in a more humble, vulnerable place is hard. But as you were saying, there's so much conditioning.
As Meg said, the compassion aspect for men who have been so molded by a sense of duty and responsibility to the economic model, I think that's really all you can start with, is actually compassion of, well, how all of us are molded. Not sure if any of that's helpful.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, all very wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks for your question.
Okay. That brings to mind a conversation I was having with some people about how, when we talk about the past and we talk about the roles, the women's role, the men's role, and we always sort of talk about how women were in this bubble. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get married. You're supposed to have children. You're supposed to. We never talk about the men's bubble. You're supposed to provide. You're supposed to do that. It wasn't easy, and in many cases, it's still not easy because sometimes those parameters are still, whatever society you're in, those parameters are still drawn. It's wonderful to, you look at it from one side. Oh, this is what women went through. Well, how about what they went through? It wasn't, I don't think it was easy. Those cookie cutter expectations weren't easy for anybody.
The problem is that in the despair of the disconnection from a land bonded, small farming, agrarian, and all the sacred festivals that went into that, once you go down the mine and your lungs are only going to last several years, or once you go into the factory and you're basically a servant of capitalism, and the way home from work is via the pub, and you load yourself up and you come home and bring violence into the family. I think that, and then that's led to generations of distrust of men and men distrusting themselves, and a collapse, like a moral, I call it fallen patriarchy. And so women are living with the trauma of that, and men are living with the trauma of that. But I think where we are in the gender wars at the moment is just a kind of a countering of that violence, of that family violence. However, I think because we're not seeing the bigger picture there of the exiling from meaningful work, and the suicide. I don't know about where you are in the States, but the suicide rates for men in Australia are it's an epidemic. And I'm not saying that this is the only story, but I think this is the big meta story that is behind this issue of roles that you're mentioning.
What suggestions would you have because I'm sure there are people in your community that don't have land?
Before we were really set up with our garden, and before we really knew what we were doing, foraging was really big for us, because what we realized by doing several courses with a Greek friend of ours whose grandparents had passed on the knowledges to him, was just realizing how much food is under our feet. A walk to somewhere, going the long way through a place where there aren't council workers spraying and mowing everything. There's always like fringy, feral areas that are full of incredibly important food medicine plants, and sometimes mushrooms in the right season. And so I think just learning to incorporate more wild foods is there's a soul aspect in that, as well as a microbiome aspect. We're getting microbes that are not in more cultivated varieties of food. We're getting wild microbes on those wild plants that we wouldn't get elsewhere. So the health benefits are huge. The walking for food aspect is huge. Yeah, we've been watching some historical videos with Woody recently about peasants and their small little potager gardens, and how the potage is the soup that's constantly on the stove, and that's where all the wild forage plants, and that's where the small plot of vegetables are just constantly going in, and anything that's a scrap vegetable or anything that, it's just this endless stew. And hopefully a rabbit is caught, and because obviously hunting is another big thing as well. Having access to land, much bigger land, getting to know local farmers that might have things like rabbits, and that may not be for you, but for another person listening in, that might be, oh yeah. So
yeah, but I also wanted, it's hard to answer that question about what else you could be doing because we don't know what you're doing. But I know for me, so to bring more wildness into our lives is fermenting foods, wild fermenting foods. That's been a really big thing. And I think that's when people live in small dwellings, that is something that you can do to bring more.
Right.
Also, sprouting foods. I love to sprout lentils. I used to sprout everything, and now I just sprout lentils because I just think they're the best, and they have 100% sprout rate. Unlike
Mm.
other delicious things like mung beans that don't have 100% sprout rate, and there's always that one that you crunch on. And I'm scared that Patrick's going to lose a few more teeth.
So, thank you. This is fascinating. I'm really enjoying the questions. I'm absolutely obsessed with fire as a place to gather around, because I remember that from my childhood. And I wanted to ask you, is the fire circle, is that on your land, or is it on common land?
So I think in Australia, being such a big country with a small population, and also bankrupted local councils, who there's real opportunity for community custodianship of common land, and we've made connections with Jarrah eldership as well, to let them know, because there are no Jarrah families. There are a few Aboriginal families from other places living locally. So the Jarrah families are north of here. But just to invite Uncle Rick here, he's come down with Jarrah and Yorta Yorta boys to do working bees on the land that we're taking care of, and inviting Beck Phillips and her partner Mitch to come down and share language and sit around fire. And I feel like that the permission doesn't need to come from local council. It actually needs to come from First People, and then the land herself. I think that's the other thing in the absence of First People, is the land herself. A lot of bureaucrats, if you ask them, will just say no, in the sort of cult of safetyism. It's really important just to not to submit to the power of bureaucrats. It's actually, this is a really big problem, and it holds, like so many things that we do are, break a bylaw, or, we're not supposed to forage for mushrooms, or we're not supposed to do this. It's like we just do not listen to any of that. And it's very hard to police that sort of stuff. So it's really, I think it's really important for people, obviously not to break laws that affect other people or affect biomes, but this is getting much back into LORE than colonial structures telling you what to do. And part of decolonization in all of us is actually dismissing bureaucracy and dismissing bureaucracy as far as we can take it. So, but what we do, because it's a fire prone area, is that in the summer months, or the fire months that extend into autumn as well, is that we ring the local volunteer country fire authority and say, hey, we're having a small cooking fire between these hours, so that their volunteers aren't sent out because a neighbor sees some smoke coming up through the forest.
Have water on hand to put it out in the warmer months.
Exactly. And it's a cleared space. It's part of the preparation for the night, is to rake up the debris. We've dug it into the ground. It's a beautiful fire pit of a 600 mil across diameter. And we just take all the necessary precautions so that if someone does rock up, we're obviously being responsible. But I think that, making sure bureaucratic madness does not engage our lives at all, and to not just resist it, but actually just to dance with it as well.
We've got a couple of questions here in the chat. I'm going to go to Gabby, your question first. Can you recommend any resources for beginning to explore herbal medicine? We have a couple of go-tos that we started off with, and they're still my go-tos when there's a health issue in our household that I turn to. The first one is called Nature's Children, and it's by Juliette de Barraclay Levy. And there's a film about her that we saw very early on in our relationship called Juliet of the Herbs. And she's a European woman who spent a lot of time with the Romani, with the Gypsies. And she's written extensively about her time, and just what she's learnt, all the different plants and combination of plants and what to make poultices with and what to chew and what to make teas from. And when her children were toddlers, she would let them suckle directly from her goats. She was really living the gypsy way. So anyway, her book and that film are really special for us. And another woman I turned to, her name is Susan Weed, and it's Susan, Susun, Susan Weed. She has a really great podcast, and she has loads of books. She's very fiery. She's a bit of a grumpy old woman, but she like the witch from the village, but she's really knowledgeable and very powerful. And she has a website, I think it's called The Wise Woman Way. Anyway, she has a book on menopause, which is on my bedside table at the moment, which I'm constantly flicking through as I move along my perimenopause journey. They're probably those go-tos, but also some foraging books I found really helpful. There's one called The Wild Wisdom of Weeds, and another one called what's Annie and Adam's book? Oh, The Weed Forager's Handbook. They're also really good, just in terms of wild food as preventative medicine, not just when you're sick, how to stay well. So hopefully that worked. Great, thanks, Gabby. And Erin, I'd like to ask about how you have gone about choosing ceremonies and rituals to incorporate into your lives. Yeah, thank you for that question. Do you want to start?
Yeah.
Go.
It's such a good question. We started in a place of real political, well, I particularly had a lot of political anger for the culture I was born into. So that really sort of activated my warrior spirit to say no and stand at the edge of our home and not allow things in, and really to do everything I could to keep the bankers realm and the corporate realm out of our domain. But once all the processes became more day to day and less industrial, and more time in the forest and more time in the garden and more time making compost, something changed. I was rewired, and I think I was rewired in a microbial sense. I was engaging with a lot more microbes. My nervous system was becoming becalmed. I still have fire, but I think and why we take the bush school every Monday, we have this whole day in a week out in the forest, and that completely rewires our minds and bodies to ground us for the rest of the week. So I think ritual and ceremony really began with gathering with in community potlucks, and we'd gather to have film nights or speaking nights and share food. And then what we found, Meg and I, like the next stage was just honoring the food. We had more and more connection and story about the origin places of where our food comes from. So therefore, gratitude was becoming naturally more heightened, and story around that food, and who are the growers and who are the microbes and what are the soil communities and all the different aspects of from the sun to the rain cycles to all the seasonal cycles and the pollinators, exactly, and just all the contributions that and then of course Mother Country. And I did a podcast, or I did a piece called Arriving at the Church of Mother Country, and that was a few years back. And I think the sacred aspect and the ritual and ceremony aspect came as a result of this rewiring.
And I think that rewiring that Patrick is talking about for us could only come by slowing down, by really being present to wherever we were and to the relationships that we were in with the people and with the trees outside our window, with the trees that, in the forest, in our garden, just, yeah, really slowing down. And through that slowing down and that shifting as we were, when we were 100% in the monetary economy, we were living in scarcity, and we couldn't see out of that fear, that need to kind of constantly get our hustle on. And living more without money brought us more into presence, more into the gift economy, and more into abundance. Having time I remember just spending time with our quince tree and just staring at all of the flowers for half an hour. I just couldn't pull myself away. And it's like, oh, like this quince tree is my teacher. And I'm learning from the gifts of these, the flowers, about generosity and just about relationship with all of the insects. But it was just such a moment of revelation for me, like how to be just so generous, just put out, and so hopeful into the future of just putting out all of these blooms and then seeing what comes back. And yeah,
being more creaturely too in our life ways. So for example, going out at night for a pee and holding the quince tree, as I did one night while peeing, and giving my nutrients back to the tree and into the very deep composted layering of gifts, I suppose, that we brought to the tree to make that tree thrive. And then just feeling for the first time this incredible, I don't know whether it was a rising sap or this vibration through the tree. And it was so stunningly beautiful. And it was the way the moon was, the night sky, the animal giving nutrient back to the plant, and then this synergy, because I was holding the tree to steady myself, and then I just cried. And so I think that's a sort of an example of rewiring. But it's also the vigils that we've been doing, going out for 3 nights and 3 days into the deeper part of the forest, knowing that this is where deep reflection and deep listening and deep grounding into the country that we're becoming more bonded with. It's not always easy work. Sometimes I call it going into fear country. Some journeys are really wonderful, and others are really hard. And there's always reluctance of going back out again. But I'm overdue for that. And I can feel that my whole sense of self requires another 3 nights and 3 days just with water, a big fast. And so I think they're coming to realize that while I love fellow humans, I see that the place of wisdom is not necessarily human. It is most usually in mother country and in other non-humans. But the human capacity to receive wisdom is something that I just value so much. And we are an information-based society, and that with information and capitalizing on information, there comes a lot of hubris. But I think what wisdom is the composting hubris to grow humility, and humility's root word is humus. So it is the very ground in which our existence is based on, is that several inches of thick, lovely, soily, decomposing matter that is compost or humus. And that is the place where wisdom is actually, I've found wisdom to be most powerful and sacred.
And also, the more that we have been decoupling ourselves from modernity and what Patrick calls hyper-techno civility, modernity and neoliberalism wants to keep suffering at bay. and wants to keep us all in a nice, happy place where we don't recognize that we have a soul. We just have a hole that we need to fill with all kinds of things that we can buy to fill that hole. And I think the further when I first realized that, it's like, oh, like the goal of my life isn't to make money and it isn't to be happy. It is to be in the human experience. Like this is my body, this is my being, and what it means to honor all of me, including the pain, the decay, the sufferings, the joys, the challenges, all of it. And how do we, the question about choosing ceremonies and rituals, I think we didn't really choose them. They kind of just grew out of us when we especially realized with the men's and women's circles, going back, because the men's and women's circles grew out of a motherhood circle and a fatherhood circle that we helped facilitate for some friends of ours. And, that was to honor all the different transitions of life, like we do with the seasons. We have certain things that we do in the seasons and also in the seasons of our lives. And, that's what rites of passages are. How do we mark these moments in our lives so they don't just rush by, but so to help us transition from one phase of life to another. And, out of that came these monthly or three weekly for the men, not grief circles, but kind of based on grief, and make, so we can process the grief, and not in a one-on-one private property with your therapist kind of way, which, I've done, earlier on in my life, and I found helpful. But now we're much more moving into the collective. How do we do it collectively? How do we do it outside of the capital economy? How do we do it within the community sphere?
We're just sort of over 50, and like we've experienced death in the community. And I'm really interested, Maggie, in the comment you made earlier about deepening that knowledge, those knowledges and experiences around death for the next half of your life. How you see that in terms of how you can self-resource through experience and readings, etc., because that really interests us a lot. Yeah.
And for me, just being up close to death and even composting, these life and death processes of circularity, and witnessing them, and then understanding that I am also part of the life and death cycle, and I'm just in my life. But as an aging woman, it's like, oh, I'm going to seed now, and this is what it is. I'm past my fruiting. Well, I'm still at the tail end of my fruiting years, but this is what is happening to me as well. And I'm just so grateful that I have young people in my life, a biological child and lots of non-biological children in my life. It's like, oh, I can really see them on the ascent. And it's like, this is helping me realize where I am in the cycle. And one of the things that Stephen Jenkinson said, which really resonates, that he sees a lot of people towards their end of their lives not wanting for their life to end. And, of course, maybe we all don't want our lives to end, but really not wanting to, just having that great fear because they haven't lived a full life to their full potential. And so for me, that is was a great invitation to like, okay, how can I live my life more fully? So when I get to the end, it'll be like, I lived a good life, and now it's my time to, return to the soil.
Yeah, he says something like to have a good death is to have a good life, and that the two are married.
Yeah.
And so I think we've just gone through the death of our 15-year-old Jack Russell, Zero, and the last year has been this slow decline. He developed dementia. He became quite stiff.
Incontinent.
He started, incontinent. He started to have some episodes, like paralyzing episodes, and all the time monitoring. He lost a lot of weight, even though he was eating as much as Lily Pilly, and tending him, making sure that we're honoring this period of time, to realize the lack of patience that I had and having to cultivate patience. So I think like Zero just taught me particularly, but I think both of us, or our whole household, so much about the dying process. And he he just led this incredible life, and he led a beautiful death as well.
And he died at home, died on his own terms, like he lived on his own terms. And for me also, my grandfather died when he was 98. And for the last year of his life, every week I would go down and I would look after him, do a 24-hour stint of looking after him as he did when he had dementia. And also that just like being close to death has taught us so much about the dying process. And yeah, I cherish every moment that I had with my grandfather, even though it was a very difficult time. Yeah, so I think that's probably the sort of
There's
shorter
lots,
version.
yeah. There's so much to say there. Just I think one thing that comes to mind too is, for a while I had a practice of speaking to my angel of death. So I actually, I just, I don't know, the name came to me, and I would call, going to bed, going to sleep, I would just open to the presence of that, and to build a relationship with um, a a spirit that will take me from my body. And I read that somewhere, and I thought, I'm going to give that a go. I don't do it anymore, but I found it really helpful in the beginning stages of just not wanting to be scared and frightened of my mortality, actually to own it and to step into that place. Processes we can do.
Yeah. And also we have some older people in our lives who aren't stepping into elderhood, who we don't feel like what we're witnessing is a lot of fear around their own mortality. And to also say that's working for them, and that's that's totally their choice, but we want to do it differently. And so learning from people around us who we feel are in right relationship with their death, and people who haven't really stepped into that yet. And I did a weekend workshop. Was it last year or maybe the year before? It was looking at death from an anthroposophical, so Steiner, an anthroposophical perspective. And yeah, that was really, really interesting. And I learned so much from that. Even just little things like, do you have a will? Are your affairs in order? So when and don't leave a house full of stuff if you feel like your death is imminent. So for the people who are left behind to kind of wade through, like get your house and your affairs in order, and also to maybe write down as part of your will, or to write down, what do you want your death to look like? What do you, maybe not the death, but the post death, like once you're dead, what do you want to happen to your body? And what does that look like for you? And what does your funeral look like? Do you want it to have it inside or outside? Is there slideshow? Is there music? Is it, like the details of it? I found that really very helpful.
Yeah, and my parents wrote to myself and my two siblings a few months ago, a few years ago, just outlining that they particularly do not want to go into a home. They really want to die at home. And so, like, putting for us, where they're 1,000 kilometers away, but I really want to honor them in that. And because of the way in which we've made our lives, where we're not beholden to a job or something like that, I would, yeah, we will probably, if it's either just me or the whole family, will shift there for that period of time and move in and help them in that. Because yeah, like a lot of, yeah, that I want to honor that time for them. We haven't always been close, but they, yeah, I would, yeah, I feel like that's a really important learning, a giving, but also a receiving, to step into that.
the growing season where we live is really small, and people just, I mean, it's very different climate to you guys, right? So like what the things that we're actually able to grow really differ. And we're in the sort of new stages of trying to sort of establish some kind of sharing setup. But I mean, it's gone down the line of like bulk purchasing from an organic wholesaler. Um, and I'm hopeful that that transitions into some sort of non-monetary gifting, gift economy sharing thing. But with this limited growing season and the limited things that people can grow, I'm kind of interested to see how that goes. And I think there's probably limits to what we can do in comparison to you guys, just because of where we are. But yeah, I guess my question's more: could you guys talk to how you established that, and whether or not you think there really are any limits on our side of the equation?
Yeah, just in terms of like growing season, we are not typical for Australia. We have a very short growing season compared to most of Australia. We're a high country. We're 800 meters up. We get snow, usually snow drifts in the winter, like -2, -3. It was probably -1 this morning. And then we can get right up into 39, 40 in the summer as our maximum. So yeah, so we get quite good rainfall, even compared to David Holmgren and Sue Dennett are friends, permaculture elders. They just live 5 k's north of here, and they probably get a third less rainfall than us. So because they're sheltered from the rain, from the southerly. So so this is a long-winded way of saying building glass houses is really important, and extending the growing season. So even like around our citrus, which are frost sensitive for the first several years, but then I built little, almost like little TARDISes, like glasshouse TARDISes around the citrus, and then I've just slowly taken them back, taken that glass out, glass I've just got from the local tip, or windows, and just created like large cloches, I think they call in France, to expand the heat units, but also building like it would be the opposite in Scotland, but so it would be your south walls, building like thermal mass or bricks or straw bale or
even a water
brick
tank.
or water tank or anything that your southern sunlight, daylight sunlight heats up, and then overnight releases that air onto the plants around it. So there's a lot of things you can do to expand your temperature range.
Sorry, guys. My main question was more about the gift economy and the
Oh, yeah.
bartering than it was the gardening aside.
Sue Dennett once said the new normal is 3 households, so yourself and 2 other households. And so, you go to the local co-op where you're buying bulk organic stuff and you have a yarn. And yarn by yarn, sort of serendipitous encounter by serendipitous encounter, if there is, positivity, and if there is sort of like the will to connect with others, that just grows. And so in many ways, I think what you were saying, Meg, is that those relationships have just deepened and deepened and deepened and grown. So there's about 80 households here locally that we're in a constant sort of gift. So some like much more regular, some might be just a few times a year. But there's about 80 households that we're just constantly in a flow of gifts relationship with.
But I think we are now, and that's taken some time to trust and to build, let that trust build itself. But I think in the beginning we were bartering more. There was a lot more really conscious of an exchange, and that was we as a way to move away from money. And realizing, we don't need more money. What we want is to have more time. And that time has enabled us to then put a lot more things in practice so we can do without money. as you know, we still obviously require some. But I think to initially it was, yeah, lots of exchanges. And then we realized, like consciously exchanges, like, okay, well, I will work in your garden for an hour and then can you give me a massage for an hour? And really kind of sticking to it. And then realizing that, as Martin has said in his comment, that when we had abundance, that's when we realized that, oh, this is how we don't need to then monitor because we can just be in the flow, and really starting with some households that also had their own sense of abundance with different things. And that's sort of that's how I felt like we worked out, how to be in the flow, because it is a flow. And sometimes we're in scarcity mode and sometimes we're in abundant mode. And this year, sometimes we'll have a lot of apples and sometimes we won't have a lot of apples.
But there's always something that is in
Yes.
abundance, whether it be our time or whether it be apples or something else. There's always something in abundance, and there's often at the same time things that are scarce. And so it's a relationship with abundance and scarcity is key, and just sort of awareness around that. But I think the barter stuff is a really clunky. Barter is a really clunky form of economy, and that's why I think people just default to money, because it's actually a very efficient form of economy. It's like, and it's as David Graeber said, money is like an economy for strangers and enemies, where there is zero trust. But if starting with your two other houses, if trust is there, and then you can just lean further and further and further into trusting relations, you can quickly barter is good on the way to establishing trust.
And we've known some people in this community for nearly 20 years and we still don't have that trust. There's a lot of love there, but we're still in the barter with them. There still isn't that flow of gifts. Some people are open and willing and really happy to engage in that way. And some people there's a barrier. It's a bit scary to take that leap. And so that's also, the people who we are in that flow of gifts arrangement with, they're happy to be in that flow. Yeah. Does anybody else have anything? So Sharon has written, first of all, Martin said, for us, the beginning was finding a means to create abundance in any way, foraging, growing, crafting. Initially, it was just homemade wine and sharing that without wanting anything in return.
Yep.
Things have grown a lot since then. Thank you. Sharon, another really helpful way of gifting is to preserve, make, create, and let all that flow. Not just fresh produce, but all that flows from that produce over time, to catch and store and share all that delicious energy. And Martin, how did you handle putting up effective boundaries with people you were building trust with? I think the effective boundaries was just not being in a gift relationship with them. So we had something happen very early on. I was teaching blogging, like how to set up a blog. This is 15 or so years ago at our local neighborhood center. And a woman from our community said, I would really love, can you help me set up a blog and I'll weed in your garden? So she came over a couple of times and I helped her set up a blog. And then when it came to the weeding, it rained each time that she was meant to come over. And then she just never came and never made the arrangement again. And a few things happened like that with her and with other people. It's like, okay, so then we've learned we don't do that, with that particular person, because yes, we can keep giving ourselves away in the gift economy, but also I want to be in the flow of gifts. Otherwise, we're just giving ourselves away. Yeah. And also something that I've learned over the years is that in the gift economy, there might not be a gift coming directly from a person you give a gift to, that there's a flow of gifts from other people.
Yeah, it's like a cosmology of generosity.
Yeah.
And then just that, that spirit of letting it flow. But also being really sort of intelligent about that as well, because if that was just a letting it flow to anybody, then we would completely deplete our ability to function outside of the industrial economy.
And Joe said it's like a pay it forward thing a lot of the time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great way to put it.
Yeah.
Does anyone else who've got experience, because it sounds like there's quite a lot of you who've got experience, want to come in here and Bessie?
Bessie, yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to share, like, when I first heard of that idea, I thought, I'm a single mum, I don't have any time, don't have any money, but that actually ended up being really helpful. Like, I was home a lot, and even just bringing in neighbours' parcels, and then because they'd be out all day, and then I'd say, I've got it to keep it safe. They ended up giving me their keys, and I could go in and feed their pets and bring in things because I was at home and I had that time. So even like being time poor and money poor, you still can find things to offer.
Yes.
And that's another thing. Thank you for that, Bessie. That helping to encourage other people to be in the gift economy when they say, I'd love to give you something, but I don't, I've got nothing to give you. And then say, well, you know how to sew, and we've got a pair of pants that need mending, or you know how to tap dance, and I would love to have some lessons, or come and tap dance at our party, or whatever it is. Just like encouraging people to
it's recognizing a gift in others and recognizing our own gifts, I think, and voicing others' gifts, just as you said, Meg, and then because it's not about just the gifts we give, but recognizing the gifts other people have and hold. And those gifts, valuing those that may not seemingly have a value.
And also giving value to things, skills and ways of being and produce and things that the monetary economy doesn't value. Like you just said, like being home to collect packages or hand-me-downs for kids, things that people are like, oh yeah, that's valuable. I can give that. Yeah. Thank you. Sharon.
People don't recognize their own gifts. They don't know what they have to give and share. And it's like the monetary economy and this capitalist system has really dampened creativity. And so people can't think outside the box of the earning cycle. And once you start to sort of illustrate to them, they can't believe that these things are valuable to others as well. So I think it's just that really getting into that generous mindset, and then it starts to come back is my experience.
Thank you. That's
Thanks,
wonderful.
Sharon. I'm going to go back to Gabby, who's got a question. I'd be interested in hearing more about your solar setup. Are you tied to the grid? Does your solar feed into batteries or some combination? So we have been in this house since 2008. And a year or so after we moved here, there was a big community solar buy-in where a whole lot of us were able to buy like a big shipping container or a big pallet of solar panels and to bring the cost down. And that was subsidized by a local kind of green group. And so it's a 1.1 kilowatt system. We are on the grid. We don't have batteries. We are not proponents for renewables necessarily.
Particularly anymore. When 15 years ago, when those panels went up, we thought that solar and wind were a good sort of methadone program for getting ourselves off oil. It's just created another massive mining boom. And so instead of actually like scaling back brown tech mining, we've just got a green mining boom. So it's like aggregating mining. Yeah, like Meg and I have become very sus on the green tech explosion and industry. And it just seems to be more of the same, more capitalism rather than methadone program, and actually bringing our energy needs down and living more humbly or with more humility. It's just like matching the hubris of fossil oil with the hubris of green tech.
So Teresa says, I agree about renewables. I think we all just need to understand why we use the energy we do and be aware of every gadget we plug in, every light we switch on, every time we reach for the car keys instead of walking or cycling, so that we can retrain ourselves out of relying on it so much. In my lifetime, personal energy consumption has exploded. Absolutely. Yeah, even in ours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I remember when I was growing up, in the 1980s and the 90s, living at home in Melbourne, my parents were always saying, put another jumper on. Here's a blanket to go to sleep. We wouldn't just put the heating on. Um, and I know that, yeah, that's changed.
Australia has three industries really to speak of: mining, gambling, and housing. And mining is probably around 70%, and then housing and gambling are the other two major industries, and everything else that we do is small cottage and smaller industries. Of course, like so much is offshore now in terms of manufacturing, and so those three big capitalisms are extremely destructive. But it also means that a very wealthy country like Australia is just got all its eggs in one basket, or its three main eggs in one basket, and I think like even just the so-called housing emergency, the emergency languaging around the housing crisis is just another exaggeration of the capitalist machine trying to expand that industry. We don't have an absence of housing crisis. We have an absence of accessibility to housing crisis, and it's so obvious where the problem lies. It's by making a basic human right into a capitalist commodity, rather than So as we know, one person might owns several houses and is renting them out to the highest bidder. So that's the problem. And we don't need more housing. We actually just need a distribution of housing so everyone has access to affordable housing. And so the ridiculous scenarios that or the narrative massaging that goes on is just constantly keeping people away from really what is happening. And so, in terms of, well, gambling is preying on the economic crisis getting worse and worse for people, and just so gambling is like the industry is like predatorial in as things get more hard, more difficult economically. That industry comes more into the fore because there's the promise of the false promise, of course, of like elevating oneself out of economic dire straits. But I think the thing why we've gone so into the men's and women's circles and the bush school and those things, rather than panic and head to the hills and dig a big container and get lots of guns and the whole sort of prepper thing, is because relationships and relating and being grounded at this time of collapse is going to be incredibly important for people, and to so that one day a week that we have in the forest with the kids is like medicine day for us. And we can get caught up in the big. We recently wrote a song called News of the World, and we were trying to really hack our own selves of like getting caught up in the big geopolitical doom stories, and just say, well, actually the news of the world is happening right here. And it's not to deny what is happening in Palestine. It is not to deny what is happening in horrific places, or places where people and biomes and more than people are suffering. But it is also saying what is the scale that we can have most agency, and where is, rather than constantly being caught up in this big global village ideology, what is the village that we can actually contribute positively and remain grounded and focused on what is coming, which is so obviously financial descent and energy descent and therefore hard times. So how do we prepare in a way that isn't Mad Max, but is actually land and people bonded? Yeah, so I guess that's our approach at the moment.
Yeah.
And in a way where we can find meaning and that we don't get caught up in the fear of it. Chris, you had your hand up first, and then Martin.
Yeah, I'll take the opportunity to thank you both for your time. It's been really wonderful, and I kind of have to shoot off after this, but I just wanted to ask my partner Erin's question. So I just get the chat up just to ask that because it was way at the beginning. So hang on. So she's currently finishing off her thesis. So she's asking as a disillusioned PhD student, how do we move knowledge making and stewardship away from neoliberal universities and maintain integrity? Thinking about living in an age of fake news and snake oil salesmen.
Yes, great. Independent websites, independent publishing of all forms, I think. Like, I think we've lost the pamphlet. I mean, I think Substack and places like that have tried to be the independent pamphlet, but
just that it's quite easy these days to publish on alternative platforms and to find information on alternative platforms.
yeah.
I feel like independent websites are where it's at.
Yeah, and like every now and again we do publish like who we're reading, and I think the invitation we always say in those posts is it's really a time for each of us to build our own information ecology and then to share them as well, so that when we have friends or like even in groups like this, or we often ask for people's, when we do a post like that or any kind of post, we also ask for people's input so that on our website there is this sort of growing information, but that happens across many independent websites that we like to go to. So I think like, but then also not investing in digital too. We're also rebuilding our book libraries,
thinking about a post-internet world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's got to be in it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, just like I'm at the moment just launching back into Russian literature, like 19th century Russian literature at the moment. I'm just so in love with what I'm reading. So particularly around peasants and peasant cosmology in that neck of the wood.
Hopefully that's helpful and you can pass that on to Erin from us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, awesome.
And Martin?
This actually dovetails quite well. I loved Recommencing Culture, your book. I think I've listened to it on YouTube maybe 6, 8 times while I'm doing the garden over the last couple of years. So my question is, as you're just saying about sources of good media, you were sort of like teasing a book for a year there, and then suddenly there's not so much teasing of the book. I'm also wondering whether, Patrick, you're going to be writing more philosophical books going forward.
Yes, and yes. I think I'm doing a lot of thinking at the moment, but also very much Woody is 12, just about to turn 13, and the fathering and Zeph is back in our lives, our eldest son, who's 23. A lot of that's my focus at the moment. And yeah, when Meg and I become empty nesters, we want to do 2 things. Get on our bikes and ride again and just ride and ride and ride.
The circumference of Australia is our plan.
But also to write more poetic works like that. I really like writers like John Berger who are also in the fields helping their neighbors harvest. And so therefore I've made or both of us as writers have made a sort of like books will come here and there, but actually then we're not writers first. But words are so important, and good writing is hard to particularly in this area, it's hard to find.
Yeah. And I also think, yeah, what is also hard to find is a balance between the doing and the talking about the doing. Yeah, I think that seems to be quite a push and pull for us. But thank you, Martin, for your question. Yeah. And Mike says, I sent your recent solstice myth to quite a few people who aren't permaculturists and they loved it. A great piece of creativity. Thanks, Mike. And Sharon says, what a lovely conversation. Thank you, Megan, Patrick, and everyone for the questions and sharing. It's so great to hear people speaking and living a new truth. It's really beautiful. Yep. Yep. Agreed. Thanks, Sharon. Well, we have 1 minute left. Does anyone have like a super quick question or comment that they would like to share?
What do you think about your film?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. It's really beautiful. Yeah, I'm really yeah, it's really beautiful. So Jordan Osmond, who's the director, lived with us for 5 months during the filming and shot 65 hours of footage over that time. So it could have gone anywhere, you know, the structure and the narrative. And I feel like he and another editor working on it with Antoinette as the producer have really shaped it in a very specific and very beautiful. It's got, yeah, it's a very intimate portrait that few people have said is sort of like a time capsule. Particularly volunteers who have lived with us, who have seen the film, have said that, like what an intimate portrait it is. Yeah, I think it's very beautiful. Yeah, really, really happy with it. Yeah, really touched actually.
I think it is because of that intimacy that we shared with Jordan, him basically gardening and farming and collecting firewood with us alongside his camera. So it doesn't feel, it was very relational.
Yeah.
And a deep friendship we had before that time.
Yeah. So when we're, you know, talking directly to the camera, because it's Jordan behind it, who we love and trust, I feel like that intimacy and that relationship comes through in our talking to the camera. And also I love that he was working with us and had the camera. So at one point, it's not actually in the film, but he was helping Patrick skin and butcher a goat. And then he's like, oh, hang on a second, I've got to film this, and then film it. And then he'd say, okay, now I've got to wash my hands and I'm helping again. And, you know, it was sort of this backwards and forwards. So when's it coming out in Europe? You're desperate to see it. We're desperate to share it.
News coming out about that shortly, about distribution. So in the next few weeks, they'll know about that.
So if you head to thenewpeasants.com, you can, there's capacity there to contact Jordan and Antoinette from Happen Films and tell them that you want to have a community screening.
Yeah.
And I think before they release it freely available online, they're really hoping to have lots of community screenings. They also have some money that they need to recoup from paying for an editor and the color grading and the sound and all that stuff. So I think once they've recouped that, then they're going to be making it available online for free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Sharon.
Super quick, if I can, just an extension of that. How are you finding audience reactions to the film?
So we've been to a couple of 3 screenings so far. All of them have sold out. We've had really, like when we saw you at Ballarat, just really great Q&As afterwards. Yeah, really, really positive feedback.
Yeah.
Good questions, you know, some challenging questions too, which is, you know, we welcome as long as they're asked with, you know, a positive
respect. Yeah, terrific. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Teresa, thank you for giving your time. It's been really encouraging, inspiring. Looking forward to eventually watching the film. I think it was through Happen Films I found you in the first place. Lovely. Thanks, Teresa. Thanks so much, everybody. That brings us to the conclusion. Thanks, Mike. Thanks so much. Yeah, and thank you, everybody who shared their questions and their stories as well tonight. Yeah, really, really grateful to spend this time with everybody.